The explosion shattered the stained glass windows, sending fragments of colored glass raining down upon the terrified congregation. I watched in horror as three masked men burst through the doors of Our Lady of Mercy Church, brandishing weapons and shouting commands. The peaceful Sunday evening Mass had transformed into a nightmare in mere seconds. As screams filled the sanctuary and people dove for cover behind pews, I found myself frozen at the altar, the chalice still in my trembling hands. In that moment of pure terror, as the leader of the attackers locked eyes with me and raised his weapon, a blue light began to emanate from the small statue of Our Lady of Aparecida in the side chapel. What happened next would change my life and the lives of everyone present forever. My name is Father Thomas Silva, and until 6 months ago, I was just another Brazilian-American priest serving a vibrant Catholic community in Houston, Texas. Born to immigrant parents from São Paulo who came to America seeking a better life, I grew up in a modest home where faith was the cornerstone of our existence. My mother placed a small statue of Nossa Senhora Aparecida, Our Lady of Aparecida, the patron saint of Brazil, in every room of our house. She watches over us, Mama would say, gently touching the dark face of the Madonna. She has never forgotten her children, even those of us far from home. And as a child, I found these constant reminders of faith somewhat embarrassing. While my American friends had homes decorated with baseball memorabilia and movie posters, ours was filled with religious icons and the sweet smell of candles burning before the images of saints. By the time I reached high school, I had largely dismissed my mother's devotion as simple superstition, a cultural relic from the old country that had no place in my modern American life. It wasn't until I was 19, studying business at the University of Houston, that something shifted within me. My father suffered a massive heart attack while working his construction job. The doctors gave him a 5% chance of survival. That night, alone in the hospital chapel, I found myself on my knees before a small statue of Mary, making promises I wasn't sure I believed in. "If you save him," I whispered, "I'll dedicate my life to serving your son." To the astonishment of his medical team, my father made a complete recovery. The cardiologist called it medically inexplicable. My mother simply nodded knowingly and placed a fresh bouquet before her statue of Nossa Senhora. And I found myself at a crossroads, confronted with a promise made in desperation that now demanded a response. The path to priesthood wasn't easy. I struggled with doubts, with the sacrifice of marriage and family, with the intellectual demands of theological study. But 10 years after my father's miraculous recovery, I was ordained at the Cathedral of the Sacred Heart in Houston, my parents beaming proudly from the front pew, my mother clutching her rosary beads and whispering prayers of gratitude to Our Lady. Our Lady of Mercy became my home 4 years later, a parish that reflected the beautiful diversity of Houston itself. We had parishioners from Mexico, El Salvador, Colombia, the Philippines, Vietnam, and a small but devoted community of Brazilian immigrants who had adopted me as their special son. They had even donated the statue of Nossa Senhora Aparecida that stood in the side chapel, her dark features and blue mantle a reminder of the faith that had crossed oceans and borders. The parish was thriving when I arrived, but it was located in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The opioid crisis had hit our area hard, and with it came increased crime, homelessness, and despair. Rather than retreat behind locked doors, we expanded our outreach. We opened a food pantry, started a free medical clinic staffed by volunteer healthcare professionals from the congregation, and established a recovery support group that met in our church hall 3 times a week. Not everyone appreciated our efforts. Anonymous complaints were filed with the city about the undesirable elements our ministries were attracting. Occasionally, offensive graffiti would appear on our church walls, which we would quietly clean away before Sunday services. But nothing prepared us for what began 3 months ago. a systematic campaign of intimidation that seemed designed to shut our doors permanently. It started with vandalism, slashed tires on the church van we used to transport elderly parishioners to Mass. Then came the threatening letters, warning us to stop enabling the junkies and to go back where we came from. The police took reports, but had little to offer beyond increased patrols. When the rectory was broken into and ransacked, with the words "Final Warning" spray-painted across my bedroom wall, the diocese suggested I consider moving to another parish. "I'm not abandoning my people," I told Bishop Ramirez firmly. "This community needs Our Lady of Mercy now more than ever." The bishop sighed, looking older than his 65 years. "I admire your courage, Thomas, but I fear for your safety. At least consider accepting security measures." We installed security cameras and an alarm system, and several of the larger men in the parish took turns keeping watch during services. For a few weeks, things seemed to quiet down. I began to hope that whoever had been threatening us had moved on or had a change of heart. Then came the fire at our medical clinic. It started in the middle of the night, a clear case of arson. No one was hurt, but the clinic, with all its equipment, medications and supplies, was destroyed. As I stood watching firefighters battle the blaze, a text message came through on my phone from an unknown number. "The church is next." I didn't tell the congregation about the threat. Instead, I called an emergency meeting with parish leaders, and we decided to continue all services, but to quietly implement additional security measures. 2 off-duty police officers who were parishioners volunteered to be present at all masses. We installed panic buttons throughout the building. We prayed for protection, for wisdom, and for the conversion of whoever was behind these attacks. The following Sunday, I noticed a group of unfamiliar faces at the back of the church during the evening Mass. 3 men who stood rather than knelt, who didn't join in the prayers or hymns. Something about their presence made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, but I reminded myself that the church was open to all, that perhaps these men were simply curious or in need of spiritual solace. One of our security volunteers noticed them too and positioned himself closer to them, but the men left halfway through the homily. They returned the next Sunday and the Sunday after that, always at the evening Mass, always watching, never participating. Our security team took photos discreetly and passed them to police, who identified one of the men as having suspected ties to a local gang involved in drug trafficking, the very same trafficking our recovery program was helping people escape. "They're surveilling the church," Officer Ramirez told me grimly. "I don't like it, Father. Let us provide a full security detail this Sunday." I agreed, but when Sunday came, the men didn't show. Neither did they appear the following week. After a month without incident, we began to relax our vigilance slightly. The off-duty officers continued to attend services, but we all breathed a bit easier, thinking perhaps the threat had passed. Then came the evening that would change everything. November 12th, the Feast of St. Josaphat. It was a smaller crowd than usual, perhaps 50 people scattered throughout the sanctuary for the 7 p.m. Mass. The Gospel reading that evening contained Jesus' warning. "In the world you will have trouble, but take courage, I have conquered the world." As I delivered my homily about facing adversity with faith, I noticed an elderly Brazilian woman, Dona Inês, gazing intently at the statue of Nossa Senhora Aparecida in the side chapel. Suddenly she crossed herself and whispered something to her husband. I faltered slightly in my homily, distracted by her reaction, but continued. We had just moved into the liturgy of the Eucharist, and I had raised the chalice in consecration when the first explosion hit. The sound was deafening. A flash of light and heat from the vestibule that blew out the stained glass windows depicting the Annunciation. Before anyone could react, the doors burst open and 3 masked men entered, carrying what appeared to be semi-automatic weapons. "Nobody move!" the leader shouted. "Face down on the floor, now!" Screams erupted throughout the sanctuary as people dropped to the ground. One of our off-duty officers reached for his weapon, but was immediately spotted. Try it and I start shooting women and children, the masked man warned. The officer slowly raised his hands and knelt down. I remained standing at the altar, the chalice still in my hands, my vestments suddenly feeling too heavy, too restrictive. My mouth was dry, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. "You," the leader said, pointing his weapon directly at me. "You're the one causing all the trouble. The one helping junkies get clean, ruining business in this neighborhood." "This is a house of God," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. "Please, take what you want and leave these people in peace." The man laughed, a harsh sound, devoid of humor. "We're not here to rob you, Father. We're here to send a message. You've been warned repeatedly to stop interfering in matters that don't concern you." He began walking down the center aisle toward the altar, his weapon trained on me. "Tonight, everyone here learns what happens when you ignore those warnings." I should have been terrified, and part of me was, but another, deeper part felt a strange calm descending. I carefully placed the chalice on the altar and made the sign of the cross. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I ask you to reconsider what you're about to do," I said. "Jesus isn't here right now," the man snarled, now just feet away from the altar steps, "but I am." As he raised his weapon, several things happened simultaneously. Dona Inês began praying loudly in Portuguese, her voice carrying clearly through the terrified silence. "Nossa Senhora Aparecida, proteja-nos na hora da nossa morte. Our Lady of Aparecida, protect us in the hour of our death." The second masked man called out, "Hurry up! We've got 2 minutes before the cops could respond." And most incredibly, the small statue of Our Lady of Aparecida in the side chapel began to glow with a soft blue light. At first, I thought it was a trick of my fear-addled mind, or perhaps light reflecting from somewhere else. But the blue illumination grew stronger, spreading outward from the statue, casting the chapel in an otherworldly azure glow. Several gasps rose from the congregation as people noticed the phenomenon. The gunman faltered, turning toward the source of the light. "What the—" The blue glow intensified until it was almost blinding, and within it I saw something that defied explanation. The outline of a woman, regal and serene, seemed to step forward from where the statue stood. She was both like and unlike the statue, the same crown, the same flowing robes, but alive, present, her dark features radiating compassion and something else, authority. "What's happening?" one of the other attackers shouted, panic evident in his voice. "What is that light?" The leader had frozen in place, his weapon still raised but his attention now fully on the glowing apparition. I watched, transfixed, as the luminous figure of Nossa Senhora Aparecida moved toward him, her feet not quite touching the ground. No one else moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft, musical rustling of what seemed to be the Virgin's garments as she approached the gunman. When she was directly before him, the man suddenly dropped his weapon as if it had burned him. It clattered to the marble floor of the sanctuary as he fell to his knees, hands covering his face. "No," he whimpered, "no, no, no." The other 2 attackers backed toward the door, their own weapons lowered, expressions of terror visible even through their masks. "She's not real," one of them shouted, though his voice cracked with fear. "It's a trick, a projection or something." But his words lacked conviction as the blue light filled more of the sanctuary, reflecting off the golden vessels on the altar, transforming the ordinary church into something celestial. The figure of Our Lady raised one hand in a gesture of both warning and blessing. No audible voice was heard, yet I had the distinct impression that she spoke, not with words but directly to our hearts. I felt a profound message of peace, of protection, but also of accountability and justice. From the expressions on the faces around me, I knew others felt it too. The leader of the attackers began to sob openly, still on his knees. He tore off his mask, revealing the face of a young man, hardly more than 20, with a jagged scar across one cheek. "I'm sorry," he cried out, addressing the luminous figure. "Forgive me, please forgive me." His companions, seeing their leaders break down, turned and fled through the doors. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the vestibule, followed by the squeal of tires as they drove away. But the young man remained kneeling, weeping openly now, his body shaking with the force of his sobs. The blue light surrounded him completely, and for a moment it seemed as if Our Lady placed her hand upon his head in a gesture of absolution. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light receded. It didn't simply vanish, but rather withdrew gradually back to the statue, which gave one final pulse of radiance before returning to its normal appearance, just a carved wooden figure of the patron saint of Brazil. The silence that followed was profound. No one moved at first, as if breaking the stillness might somehow diminish what we had witnessed. I found myself gripping the edge of the altar for support, my legs suddenly weak. It was Donna Inez who finally spoke, her weathered face streaked with tears, but glowing with joy. "Milagre," she said simply. "Miracle." Her word broke the spell. People began to rise from the floor, embracing one another, some crying, others laughing in relief. Several approached the kneeling young man, not with anger but with cautious compassion. One of the off-duty officers secured the abandoned weapon and spoke quietly into his radio, calling for police backup, but making it clear there was no longer an active threat. The other officer approached the young man and helped him to his feet. "I need to turn myself in," the young man said, his voice hoarse from crying. "I've done terrible things. We were going to... He couldn't finish the sentence. "We know what you were going to do," the officer said grimly. "But you didn't. That's what matters now." As the officer led him to a pew to wait for patrol cars to arrive, the young man looked back at me. "Did you see her?" he asked desperately. "Did everyone see her or just me? Am I losing my mind?" I approached him slowly, still feeling shaky, but compelled to offer reassurance. "We all saw her," I confirmed. "Our Lady was here." "Why?" he asked, his expression bewildered. "Why would she show herself to someone like me? I've hurt people. I was going to hurt more tonight." I had no easy theological answer for him, only the truth as I understood it. Because no one is beyond redemption. Because mercy reaches places justice cannot. The police arrived minutes later, followed by news crews who had picked up the call on police scanners. As the young man was led away in handcuffs, he kept looking back at the statue of Nossa Senhora Aparecida, his expression a complex mixture of fear and wonder. The church quickly filled with emergency personnel, reporters, and curious onlookers. Our parishioners gave statements to police, describing both the attack and what followed. Some spoke openly of the miraculous appearance, while others, perhaps fearing ridicule, described it more cautiously as an unusual light or some kind of deterrent that scared them off. Bishop Ramirez arrived within the hour, his face grave as he surveyed the damaged windows and the remnants of the explosive device in the vestibule. He listened to my account in private, his expression giving nothing away. "You understand the Church's position on alleged apparitions, Thomas," he said carefully. "A thorough investigation will be required. People are easily caught up in mass hysteria during traumatic events." "With all due respect, Bishop," I replied, "what happened tonight was not hysteria. Dozens of people from different backgrounds all witnessed the same thing. The security cameras probably captured it too." The bishop sighed, rubbing his forehead. "The cameras show a bright light emanating from the chapel area, certainly unusual, but not definitively supernatural. We must be cautious, especially with the media already circling." He was right about the media. By morning, the story had spread far beyond Houston. "Virgin Mary stops church attack," read one headline. "Divine intervention in Houston," proclaimed another. Some reports were respectful, others sensationalistic. Several questioned the sanity of those who claimed to have seen the apparition. The young man who had surrendered, Marcus Johnson, gave a full confession to police. He revealed that he and his companions were members of a local gang whose drug trade had been impacted by our recovery program. The plan had been to injure or kill enough people to ensure the church would close permanently. But she stopped me, he told detectives in a recorded statement that later leaked to the press. She looked at me, and I saw everything I'd ever done wrong, but also everything I could still do right. I couldn't go through with it. Marcus's statement corroborated what our congregation had experienced, lending credibility to accounts of the apparition. Still, skeptics offered alternative explanations. A sophisticated light show designed as a security measure, mass hallucination triggered by fear, or an elaborate hoax orchestrated to generate publicity for the church. I knew the truth, as did everyone who had been present that night. In the days that followed, our parish became a site of pilgrimage. People came from across the country to pray before the statue of Nossa Senhora Aparecida, hoping for their own miraculous experience. Some claimed to feel a special peace in the chapel. Others reported answers to long-standing prayers. The diocese established a commission to investigate the event, following the church's protocols for alleged supernatural occurrences. Theologians, psychologists, and scientists interviewed witnesses, examined the statue, and reviewed all available evidence. I was questioned repeatedly, asked to recount every detail, pressed to consider natural explanations. "I'm not claiming certainty about what happened," I told the commission. "I only know what I witnessed, along with 50 other people. Something extraordinary occurred that night, something that transformed violence into repentance." As the investigation continued, our parish experienced another kind of miracle, the miracle of renewal. Attendance at masses tripled. Our recovery program expanded to help more people escape addiction. Former gang members, inspired by Marcus's transformation, sought help in leaving behind lives of violence. Marcus himself, awaiting trial, requested religious instruction while in detention. I visited him weekly, witnessing a profound conversion that went beyond the emotional response of that night to a genuine desire for redemption. "I'll serve whatever sentence they give me," he told me during one visit. "I deserve it. But when I get out, I want to help others like me, show them there's another way to live." 4 months after the attack, the diocese concluded its preliminary investigation. While stopping short of officially declaring a supernatural event, Bishop Ramirez acknowledged that what happened at Our Lady of Mercy was worthy of belief. The Church's careful language for experiences that appear consistent with authentic divine intervention. "Whatever one concludes about the nature of the event," the bishop stated in a press conference, "its fruits are undeniably positive. Lives saved, hearts changed, faith renewed." The damaged stained glass windows were replaced with a new design depicting Our Lady of Aparecida protecting the faithful during a storm, a permanent memorial to that extraordinary evening. Donations poured in to rebuild our medical clinic, which reopened with expanded services 6 months after the arson attack. Our church now holds a special novena to Nossa Senhora Aparecida every year, leading up to her feast day on October 12th. People of all backgrounds attend, drawn by the story of what happened here. I've heard countless testimonies from those whose lives were touched by the events of that November evening: marriages healed, addictions overcome, faith rediscovered. As for me, my own faith was transformed. I had always believed in the abstract idea that God is present in our world, that the communion of saints includes not just those who have gone before us, but a real, active participation in our earthly struggles. Now I knew it with a certainty that transcended intellectual assent. When I stand at the altar now, raising the chalice in consecration, I often feel a trace of that blue light surrounding me. Not visible to the eye, perhaps, but perceptible to the heart that has been awakened to the thin veil between heaven and earth. I remember my mother's words from childhood: "She watches over us. She has never forgotten her children, even those of us far from home." In my youth, I had dismissed this as simple cultural piety. Now I understand it as profound truth. Our Lady of Aparecida did not appear that night because our church bears her name or because Brazilian immigrants prayed to her. She came because we are all her children, because no one, not even an armed man intent on violence, is beyond the reach of divine mercy. 6 months have passed since that night. The media attention has largely moved on to newer stories, though documentary crews still occasionally request interviews. The pilgrimages have slowed to a manageable stream. Our parish continues its work of feeding the hungry, healing the sick, and supporting those in recovery. Marcus Johnson pled guilty to reduced charges and received a 10-year sentence. He leads a prayer group in prison now and is studying theology through a correspondence course. "My body is incarcerated," he wrote to me recently, "but my soul has never been more free." As for the neighborhood, something has shifted. The drug trade hasn't disappeared, but it has diminished noticeably. Other churches and community organizations inspired by our story have launched their own outreach initiatives. Hope has taken root where despair once seemed the only possibility. I still stand before the statue of Nossa Senhora Aparecida each day, offering prayers of gratitude. Sometimes I'm alone, sometimes I'm joined by parishioners or visitors drawn by the story of what happened here. The statue itself appears unchanged, the same dark Madonna with her gentle expression and blue mantle. Yet all of us who were present that night see her differently now. We know that in our darkest hour, when violence threatened to desecrate not just our sanctuary, but the sanctity of human life itself, heaven reached down to earth. A thin place was created where divine protection manifested in a way that could not be ignored or explained away. "Do you think she'll ever appear again, Father?" people often ask me. "She is always appearing," I reply, "in acts of mercy, in moments of conversion, in the courage to stand against darkness. We simply need the eyes to see." As you reflect on this story, perhaps you're wondering if such things are truly possible in our modern world. Can heaven still break through in visible, tangible ways? Can a centuries-old devotion to Our Lady of Aparecida still transform lives in 2025? I invite you to open your heart to this possibility. Whether you've been devoted to Our Lady all your life or are hearing of her for the first time, she is a mother who never abandons her children. In times of deepest need, when human solutions fail and darkness seems to be winning, remember the blue light that filled our sanctuary and transformed violence into peace. And if this account has touched your heart or rekindled your faith, perhaps you might say a prayer to Nossa Senhora Aparecida for your own intentions. Share this story with someone who needs hope. Remember that even in our troubled world, divine protection remains just a prayer away. Nossa Senhora Aparecida, pray for us.